Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of Windy City Gridiron Radio. With you, as always, is your host, Robert Zaglinski. And I'm pleased to be joined by, I think it's the second time, by the Athletic beat writer for the Bears, Kevin Fishbain. We've got rookie mini camps. We've got the summer camp season about to start up here before a little, I don't know, 4 or 5 week break, if we can really qualify that as a break. And I'm really happy to have Kevin come on. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Robert. It's kind of that weird downtime between the draft and rookie minicamp, as you said, and luckily it's beautiful weather in Chicago, so nice to have that. But the Bears' offseason schedule is a little condensed this year with the Hall of Fame game, so we get right to it in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, they'll have that. They'll prepare for camp in that respect. But before we start any of that, so the Ryan Pace plan, Kevin, kind of got into full motion, or was topped off with the draft. But that doesn't mean that the Bears roster is finished. It doesn't mean that there aren't things to sort out there. There are positional battles, which we'll get to later. There are roster concerns. What are some general questions that you're looking kind of to be answered over the next few months? I mean, we can count it. So you'll be looking first at rookie minicamp, but you can mold in training camp in the preseason as well, because obviously it's going to come along faster than we think.
Yeah, well, I think the overarching question we're going to have is Mitch Trubisky in year 2 and the new offense. How that all works together with Matt Nagy. So I think that's going to be something we'll be watching in OTAs. We got a glimpse of it at the veteran minicamp a few weeks ago. We want to see how Mitch continues to develop, how he fits in this offense. That's kind of going to be the question from now until week 1, is just how that works. I think the big thing about OTAs, and it can be kind of boring, but really that one of the biggest things we're looking for when we're out there is the injured players. So when does Allen Robinson get going? What about Kyle Long? Is Anthony Miller good to go like he said he is after the foot injury? So that's a little bit more micro in terms of the questions we had. Leonard Floyd, a huge one.
Right.
Will he be involved in OTAs and to what level? So the macro in terms of Mitch and the offense, micro is kind of the injuries. And then, you start, as we get closer, Bourbonnais, we start talking depth chart, we start talking position battles, and we start getting to know which of the rookies and new players, how they'll be involved with this new team. Certainly, and obviously, way more questions on offense than defense. But that's kind of those kind of things, I guess, kind of set the table for us, starting with the OTAs, which begin next Wednesday, at least open to the media next Wednesday, all the way through training camp into the preseason.
Are OTAs, so, I mean, they obviously, what else are you looking for? They're not obviously just, they're obviously not just a place where you're looking to see how guys are progressing physically. What else do you specifically look for when you're out there reporting, especially for a younger team like this that's kind of trying to break through? What are you looking for specifically?
Yeah, well, I think I'll be looking for people being in sync with that offense. How smooth is the operation? Just from the exchange from center to quarterback to nobody false starting, to receivers and tight ends running crisp routes, to Mitch making good throws, running backs running their routes. I think that is going to be a big part of OTAs and how that gets there. One of the things that was interesting what Matt Nagy said at the last mini camp is he just wanted Mitch to go. And I totally respect that. He just wants Mitch to just make mistakes on the fly and just keep going, get reps, get comfortable, get used to the new offense. And I want to see how that kind of evolves as things get more difficult, as things get added to his plate, as he has, he hasn't thrown Allen Robinson yet. He hasn't thrown Anthony Miller yet. So we'll start to see that. The other thing in OTAs that I'm kind of curious about, and this is more something I guess you can kind of hear is and see a little bit, is who are the leaders of this team? Right. This is a team that is bringing back one captain from last year. And Sheriff Manis is hardly a vocal captain. He's more of a lead by example, special teams guy. You know, how everyone keeps telling us that Mitch is taking control. Well, I want to see that on the practice field. Is there somebody else on offense, whether it's Cody Whitehair or Charles Leno, maybe Allen Robinson with that big contract is comfortable kind of taking a leadership role. On the defensive side, is it Keem Hicks and Danny Trevathan, you know, who helps replace the Pernell McPhee void in that defense room. So, you know, when we get to OTAs, we can start to maybe see some of those guys. But one of the biggest things that I take from OTAs, as you kind of mentioned, is these new players, because, you know, we've seen Allen Robinson play for Jacksonville. Now we get to see him play in Matt Nagy's offense and Mitch Trubisky. We saw Taylor Gabriel in Atlanta. Well, now we get to see what he looks like here. How are they going to use him? How is Tariq Cohen going to be used in this new offense? So those are a bunch of the things that we can kind of start to get a little bit of an idea of. You know, the other thing too at OTAs, because there's no pads, you learn a lot more about the offense and the passing game than you do anything else.
Yeah.
And in return, you can glean a little bit about the secondary, but there's only so much you can get from watching the front seven until the pads come on. So really, so much of it is going to be watching these kind of the passing game, both on offense and defense.
Yeah, I mean that's unfortunate. I mean, if you're looking for something a full on showing, considering that the offensive and defensive linemen are probably just going through their steps, making sure they're going to the right spots. I can imagine that can be occasionally distracting to note them from that perspective. You mentioned Trubisky being the onus is on him, so he has to be the leader. You want to see him taking control of the team. You want to see him becoming the guy that the Bears continually insist that he is, the star player, the captain, the quarterback, whatever else. What, with everything now in place, with the cast of offensive weapons he has and the kind of the support system they put in place for Trubisky, what would you say are reasonable expectations for him statistically and then just in general, like in an anecdotal fashion?
Yeah, you know, I think it's been fascinating this week to see some of the narratives about the Vegas over-under on how it's still 6.5 wins despite everything that the Bears have done. And I think that goes to Mitch. When you look at the Eagles and Carson Wentz, we saw flashes of Carson Wentz as a rookie. Like Chicago fans saw it when the Eagles came to Soldier Field in week 2. Now, he had an up and down rookie season. It was far from perfect. But there was a lot of wow moments from Carson Wentz. I think I don't know offhand what the Eagles over under was heading into last year. Certainly no one was picking Super Bowl for them, but they were a bit of a sexy pick. I think the Rams and Jared Goff are a much better comp for the Bears ceiling for 2018 and then Mitch Trubisky's ceiling. So I pulled up Goff's stats. So, you know, 2016 he played 7 games, 5 touchdowns, 7 picks. And last season, he played in 15 games, 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, completed 62% of his passes. That's really good. That's a 100.5 rating. I think the Bears would love those numbers from Mitch Trubisky. And I think that is attainable. I think that's kind of the ceiling a little bit. I think it's unfair. Frankly, it's probably unfair to ask for that out of Mitch.
Right.
That was a pretty incredible year for Jared Goff, and we saw what the Rams did with Todd Gurley, the revamped offensive line. You had Sammy Watkins and Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, everything they brought in there, and they put in Sean McVay, obviously. I think when you look at the Bears, they hope that Matt Nagy can be Sean McVay. They hope that Mitch Trubisky can be Jared Goff. And it's kind of funny the two of them are working out together. You look at, you know, they brought in Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, and Anthony Miller, and Trey Burton, like the Rams brought in their new weapons. So that's a much more, it's a much fairer comp to discuss when talking about projections on the Eagles, because you just can't talk about a Super Bowl champion, and Carson Wentz was putting up MVP numbers before he got hurt. So I think if you look at Jared Goff, you look at the Rams, it's like, okay, that's what Mitch can do. Can Mitch throw at least 20 touchdowns? Can keep his interceptions, which was something that he was, you know, that was one of the best things about his first year, was his decision making.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fact that he didn't throw it away. And I think part of that, we might laugh, but I think John Fox being super, super conservative, that might have been one of the positive consequences of that, was that Mitch did a good job protecting the football. So, you know, he threw 7 touchdowns and 7 picks, But 7 touchdowns in 12 games, what does that come out to? Only 10 touchdowns in a 16-game season. So obviously that needs to double, maybe even come close to tripling that production number. And then you look at the interceptions, trying to stay around 10 and not going too much higher than that. And if you can get your passer rating into the 90s, I think the Bears would feel great. Look, Jay Cutler set records for the Bears franchise, and his passing rating was almost always in the mid 80s. So if you can get Trubisky to those numbers, I think you'd be thrilled. You'd be amazed if he put up Jared Goff numbers. But I think you're allowed to ask for that and hope for it as a Bears fan, certainly. And I think from projections, you're looking at that 90 quarterback rating range. And can he get in there and stay efficient and be productive?
I don't necessarily think this is going to happen, but I'm just going to play devil's advocate in a way. What if he falls short, or what if he has a bad season based off of the expectations that are kind of being laid on him? So he doesn't reach those statistical marks and he doesn't entirely play well. Is that a huge panic, or is it just understanding that he still has a long way to go in development? I'm sure that's not how the narrative would necessarily develop, but
listen, I think it's a fair thing to bring up, and I don't think it's a slight against Mitch to talk about it, because it's just the way the NFL is. It's so hard to predict anything, especially with that position. I've said this before. If Mitch, for some reason, and let me make this very clear, I don't think this is going to be the case, and I can tell that you don't think this is going to be the case either. If he takes a step back, if he is not the quarterback the Bears thought when they did all this work this offseason to, build him up, build around him, and if he flails, that's the end of Ryan Pace's career as a Bears general manager. I mean, you start clean. I think the way the NFL is built, you don't have time to say, well, it's his first year in the new offense, first year with all these new players. No, this is a franchise that hasn't been in the playoffs in 2010. There is I give the McCaskey family credit for their patience level, but if Mitch, does not have a good year, and when I say does not have a good year, I mean, you can't, if you're sitting there on January 1st and you're thinking, oh my goodness, the Bears made a mistake, he's not the guy. You've got real organizational problems, and you're going to have to probably start over at the quarterback position and the personnel department. Like that's how sweeping that would be if that scenario exists. I'll reiterate, I don't think that's going to happen. I think in a worst case scenario, Mitch has an average, a decent season and puts the Bears at least in position to play some meaningful games in December, which is a low bar, but they haven't done it in 5 years. I think that's more realistic in terms of low bar. But yeah, I mean, if things go haywire for him, if he just can't figure it out for some reason, then yeah, you're looking at you better start researching those 2019 quarterback prospects.
Oof, that's a lot of pressure on the 2018 season. Yeah. But
that's the way it is. I mean, that's just the way the NFL is. It's like you just don't have time to sit and try, especially when you're the Bears. You just don't have time to work it again and try, give them another shot. Look, this is not something that I think will happen. And I think we've seen the tools from him. And I think that one of the things that Mitch has going for him too, when you're talking about the projections, is I think you could really wipe a lot of last year clean. And because it was a different play caller, a different head coach. His top 3 wide receivers last year were Dontrell Inman, Kendall Wright, and Josh Bellamy. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Who's going to play well? You had a different offensive line group, it seemed like, every week. The best playmaker on the team was not being utilized at all to his full potential in Tariq Cohen. He didn't have his best tight end out there with him. And the guy that they used a second-round pick on was a Division III player. Half the time it seemed like they weren't comfortable with him out in the field. So I think you can really wipe that clean, which does give him a little bit of the benefit of doubt if it's a slow start, if it's only an average season. But I go back to the Jared Goff comparison. Goff had a bad first year. People thought he was a bust. And I think Mitch could probably thank Jared Goff that people aren't saying that Mitch Trubisky is a bust right now. That they're giving him some credit for how bad things were around him, and that they think that this year he can kind of obviously be a completely different quarterback.
Moving the conversation away from the destruction of Ryan Pace Bears. So I mentioned rookie minicamp starting, so you'll have the entire 2018 class coming in, picks, draft picks, and undrafted free agents. I don't have the entire list in front of me, but that obviously includes Roquan Smith, James. I don't have the entire list of undrafted free agents, that is, but that includes Roquan Smith, James Daniels, Anthony Miller, Joel Igbunwe. I think I'm saying that right. I still don't have that down. Do you have that down?
E.A. Buniwe.
E.A. Buniwe. Okay. I'm probably not going to get that.
Just call him Iggy.
Yeah, we'll just call him Iggy. Iggy coming in. How important is this first camp experience for young guys, and what do you think the Bears look for from these guys in their first experience at Hallis Hall, and what do you look for? I mean, I'm pretty sure from your perspective it'll be the same thing from your general camp thoughts or mini camp thoughts.
So one of my favorite things from covering rookie camp it is the largest disparity of football talent that you might see ever on a football field. Because now, training camp, the difference between, who would you actually? This is an interesting thought-provoking question. Who is the best player on the Bears? Do you think, overall? So, would you say Akeem Hicks?
I'd probably say Akeem Hicks. I mean, I remember watching.
If Leonard Floyd was healthy, I'd probably say Leonard.
Right.
But okay, so the difference between Akeem Hicks and their the 90th player on the roster in Bourbonnais, that's going to be a big gap in a lot of things, financially, skill-wise. But when you talk about rookie minicamp, you're going to have Roquan Smith on one side of the field, who is going to cash a $20 million guaranteed contract and is expected to be a 10-year, 15-year player, perennial Pro Bowler. On the other side, you're literally going to have a tryout player that they plucked off the street in terms of this is a 22-year-old who played at Division III Wisconsin lacrosse, who has no chance of ever playing an NFL game, or virtually no chance of playing an NFL game, making maybe $1,000 for the weekend to get a Bears jersey and take a picture and run around.
Yeah,
it's wild. It's one of those things. I remember one of my first rookie mini camps, that was so evident with Kevin White, the physical ability that he had in that rookie mini camp. It's kind of sad to talk about it now, compared to everybody else in that field, was mind blowing. And I think what rookie minicamp does is we'll get a very good idea of how good Roquan Smith and Anthony Miller are and how fast they are compared to everybody else in the field, because you're talking about guys who might not ever even make it to a training camp. But that's just the reality of the situation. So it's kind of a fascinating comparison when you're out there. So you do get a good look at that. I think Anthony Miller is probably the number one player under the spotlight for us, even though because as I talked about with OTAs, there's no pads. We're not going to see Roquan Smith hitting anybody, but Miller will be able to really watch him run routes and watch him catch passes from whatever NAIA quarterback they bring in for the week. Actually, it might be Tyler Bray. We'll find out on Friday. So Anthony Miller is probably going to be the number one focus for us. I think the Bears personnel department, they're going to be really focused on certainly Miller. They're going to want to see James Daniels at guard and how he works there. It's going to be his first time playing guard. It's going to be huge. They're going to be watching Roquan Smith and how he's projecting inside their defense and how he's handling the calls and how he's handling Vic Fangio's scheme. So those are the things they'll be looking. We'll look at that too, but the Bears obviously have a little bit more intimate knowledge on what they want from those guys. And then, the other defensive guys, E.A. Buniwe, Fitz, Bilal Nichols, how are they managing this Vic Fangio defense? How can they handle it? The UDFAs, I think cornerback is the interesting position there.
Yeah, Kevin Tolliver and Michael Joseph.
Right, you got two guys who had draftable grades on them from a bunch of services brought in there, especially Tolliver. When you look at that physique, and you can see he was kind of fell out of the draft mainly because of some character red flags. That's going to be fascinating to see how those guys perform in rookie minicamp. But because they're already undrafted and going to have signed contracts, their kind of real big day is going to come more when we get to training camp. But we'll still be keeping an eye on those guys. They brought in a bunch of defensive linemen too, undrafted rookies, and some edge rushers, which obviously edge rusher obviously a position of need. So those are So those are a few of the guys that we'll be kind of watching.
Do you buy all of the Daniels at guard talk long term, or is this something where he's going to be the center by week one? I'm not sure how much I buy into that conversation in early May.
Yeah, I'll say this from being around Ryan Pace has a much different view on the importance of sticking to one position in the offensive line than a lot of us do.
Okay.
That is for sure. I mean, like, my first gut reaction is like the way they handled the Kyle Long thing was a disaster. Like, that was really bad what they did with him in 2015. And you can make the same argument for what they did to Cody Whitehair last year when guys got hurt and suddenly they moved him to guard. Not to mention moving him to center a week before the season started because they wanted Josh Sitton so badly. So, this is a general manager that believes in 5 best guys and versatile interior linemen. Clearly, Matt Nagy agrees. And I think with James Daniels, the nice thing about having Harry Hiestand is I think you can put a little faith in Harry Hiestand to make the best call there. I imagine they really like the idea of Cody Whitehair sticking with Mitch Trubisky and continuing to build that rapport from center to quarterback. And we've talked so much about how this offseason is all about Mitch. I think that factors in. Everyone I talked to about James Daniels, granted, there were a lot of people very close to James Daniels, so they're a little biased. They don't think it's going to be a problem at all for him. And he's only 20. He's got all the athletic ability in the world. He's got a good frame, good movement skills. And frankly, actually, his college coach mentioned this to me. It might even be easier because he's not going to have to worry so much about all the calls that a center has to make. So that's something he already knows how to do. So it gives the Bears a nice versatile weapon. I get the vibe. Just I wonder if the Bears were kind of surprised he was even on the board, and he was just number 1 on their board. Boom. All right, we take him. It's kind of maybe I don't. Again, they'll never kind of walk us through how it happened, but I envision a scenario with like, hey, James Daniels is still here. Can he play guard? Yes, he can play guard. Harry, do you think he can play guard? Yes, he can play guard. Boom, let's do it. Like, I wonder if that is what happened in there, because there were not a lot of people, I think, that expected him to still be there at 39.
Yeah, I saw the conversation. I wasn't surprised that he was available there, but some people that first round, maybe that was a BPA best player available situation that kind of threw everything off kilter. I actually probably expected a trade down considering what they've done in the past 2 years. So
yeah, that looked when they were on the clock, we were kind of wondering the same thing, if that seemed like a good spot to trade down. There were a lot of defensive backs and wide receivers still available, but that's gonna be a huge thing this week, is his first time at guard, because I think, knowing from what I know about Harry Hiestand, I feel like the Bears are gonna know right away if this guy really can play guard.
Perfect. Moving over, kind of going to stick. We're going to span out the entire offseason, so free agency and the draft, Kevin. Before we do that, follow us on Twitter at Windy City Gridiron, at WC Gridiron. Follow Kevin on Twitter at KFishbain, and follow me on Twitter at Robert Soklinski. As I was saying, newcomers. Kevin, who's going to make the biggest impact for the Bears this season, in your opinion, of all of the new faces?
Good question. Well, I think the Bears probably hope it's Allen Robinson.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're giving him all the money. So, I guess it's hard because we just don't know how this offense is going to work and what his role is going to be, and him coming back from injury. Just to go off the board a little bit, I'll say Trey Burton.
Ooh.
I mean, what he's making $8 million this year.
He's the sixth highest paid tight end in the league.
Yeah, and just kind of being at the few practices we were at and kind of watching how they're using him. I mean, this guy, they expect to be Travis Kelce. Obviously Travis Kelce light. I emphasize that. But I have a feeling, again, you follow the money. They believe very strongly in him. It's an incredibly important part of Matt Nagy's offense. And I wonder if he is bound for a big year to live up to that number. I mean, this is somebody that like on the plane ride from Kansas City to Chicago, Matt Nagy was already talking with Ryan Pace about Trey Burton and like that tight end position. So, just kind of putting 2 and 2 together, it seems like they have really high expectations for him. So I'll throw him out there as, kind of a sleeper pick, because again, it should be Allen Robinson. He should be the one that's the most productive of all the new guys. But I wonder if, relative to his position, and certainly relative to what the Bears got from the tight end position last year, I wonder if Trey Burton ends up being the guy that we look back and be like, wow, that really was. Listen, it's probably going to go one or two ways. Either he makes it worth their while, or we talk about another, botched signing for Ryan Pace. But he's an intriguing guy for folks to keep an eye on with this offense, because it's what Zach Miller was doing, but obviously Trey Burton younger with a little more speed and athleticism than Zach Miller.
I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say Tariq Cohen, because I think he's not necessarily a new face, but I think the way he's going to be used isn't something that we saw last year. I think he's actually going to be efficiently used. And again, this is just me going off the board and cheating, trying to make this a little more fun. But I just think that the way that Matt Nagy and company are going to apply him in the offense and use him like that dynamic electric weapon he is, and the way and the creative ways they'll get the ball into his hands, it'll essentially be a new player. It won't be. I mean, he was a home run threat throughout the entire year last year, but they misused him. They could have had those occasional touchdowns, the reverse punt return, the every time he reversed on a run play. They could have had that in much greater spurts and in better ways, and getting the ball into space, getting the ball to him in space. So, I mean, from that perspective, to me, that's like almost an entirely new facet of this offense. So I'll say him.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think we're all looking forward to seeing how Tariq Cohen is used in this offense, and certainly, listen, I think we could all assume that it's going to be at least in a more creative fashion than last year.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a high bar to clear. That's for sure. Rookie to make the biggest impact, Kevin. So this year you have a smaller board here, or not really, if we include an undrafted free agents, but I don't think you're going to pick an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Roquan Smith should have 100+ tackles and a few forced fumbles and a few sacks and maybe an interception. I mean, the guy, is talented enough and has the mental makeup and is with the right coordinator and in the right defense to be incredibly productive. I mean, he should be putting up, essentially Jarrell Freeman numbers, what Jarrell Freeman was doing when he was healthy and not suspended. I mean, that's the type of player that Roquan Smith should be. I will throw this out there. I really like the Anthony Miller pick. And if the only question about him is his foot, and if that's cleared, this is a guy that maybe not his rookie year, but this is a guy that maybe a couple years down the line we look at the slot the Bears drafted him, what they did to get him. Who knows? We could look back at that as being one of the best picks Ryan Pace has made, because the talent is immense with him. His body is a little slight. He's not. The question, is he going to be able to take a hit? Over the middle in certain situations. But that's the guy that really kind of intrigues me. I mean, again, Roquan Smith's my answer. But Anthony Miller is kind of the guy in this draft that I'm really very curious to see what kind of career he puts together and how we reflect back on that draft pick.
To Roquan, are you being super bold and on declaring on this podcast, Kevin, that Roquan Smith will be Defensive Rookie of the Year? Because that's the kind of stat line and description that fits someone of that award. Is that what you're saying right now?
Well, I never put myself on the spot, because why would I do that? I'll just be wrong. Well, there was a time that it was in like the late or I should say like the late aughts, there was a time where it was like always linebackers. I just pulled it up. It was like Vilma, Merriman, D'Amico Ryans, Patrick Willis, Gerard Mayo, Brian Cushing. All those guys are like tons of tackles, probably a few tackles for loss. Since then, we've kind of, I think maybe as analytics have become more popular, Marshawn Lattimore last year, Marcus Peters a couple of years ago, and then obviously you had some guys who get after the quarterback. So there was a time that it seemed to almost always go to that middle linebacker who was just racking up tons of tackles, because voters like numbers. And if a voter's not watching the Bears regularly and they just flip up and check out the stats and they see these got however many tackles. But that's changed a little bit, as I said, over the years, that we've now seen defensive linemen and cornerbacks and guys who are creating turnovers. So I think for Roquan Smith to get Defensive Rookie of the Year, he's going to need to create turnovers, because he's not going to match Bradley Chubb for sacks. So can he force fumbles? Can he recover fumbles? Can he, create interceptions. And I think with Bradley Chubb rushing opposite Von Miller in that defense, it's hard to pick against Bradley Chubb early on. And as I said, I think voters have gotten a little smarter, not just giving it to the guy who's got the most tackles. So if Roquan Smith wants that award, he's going to need to have impact plays to pair with the tackle numbers.
I was thinking of a nice bounce off answer there, but I have to agree it'll be Smith. And I agree with the stance that he has to do more tilts the field plays aside from just being a tackle, pro football focused darling. Kevin, someone that needs, kind of just rolling down the list here, someone that badly needs a breakout or big 2018 season aside from Mitch Trubisky.
All right. Needs a breakout season.
Like a bit, whatever that means to you, whatever a big or breakout season means to you. So this is subjective based on.
Okay. Yeah. So can I just give you a few names that just are coming to mind right now?
Okay.
I think Jordan Howard. I think this is somebody who there's so many questions of how he fits in this offense. He's heading into his third season. He's had a lot of carries already in 2 seasons. How is he taking care of his body? How is he going to handle the new offense? What is his role going to be? Can he still be a 1,000-yard rusher? Can you still rely on him, late in games? Can he be more reliable late in games instead of, or 2-minute drills instead of it being Benny Cunningham? So like this is the guy who just because of his position and the way it works in the NFL, if Jordan Howard does not have an outstanding season, then you could be looking at a new starting running back in 2019. I think that's just the reality of the running back spot, how much it churns guys out. So I'm very curious to see how he handles this year on the defensive side of the ball. Jonathan Bullard is like, it's either now or never, I think, for him. I think that he's got that spot is open, that starting spot in the base 3-4. If he wants it, that's his. If he can earn it. They drafted Bilal Nichols. They have a couple intriguing undrafted rookies at the defensive line. They have Roy Robertson-Harris. I think Bullard, I think now is the time for him to put it all together consistently, not just a couple of preseason games or training camp practices. And then the third name I'll throw out there is Adrian Amos. I know there's been talk.
Didn't he have a breakout last year, technically?
Yeah, but here's my thing with Adrian Amos is I think he had a good year last year. Certainly, I was most impressed with Adrian Amos's run defense last year, but he had 1 interception, and it was a ball that was tipped up in the air for him by Bryce Callahan. And listen, like you still got to be in the right spot. You still made the play. He still made it an incredible return for the touchdown against Baltimore. That was one of the plays of the season. But you're talking about a guy who is playing defensive back, who has started, he started 40 games. I'm checking it right now. He started, 40 games, and he has 1 interception in 40 games and 10 passes defense. And I know as a strong safety, he doesn't need to put up those numbers, but you're talking about a guy who I want to see him build off that breakout year. I want to see him continue to ascend. The talent is definitely there. And clearly the Bears think so based on the way they handled free agency in the draft by not taking any safeties. So I don't know if the Bears are thinking about giving him a long-term deal before the season starts, but you're talking about if he goes out there and picks off a couple of passes or has a great training camp, fine nose for the ball, then you could talk about a guy who can earn a contract in the top 5, top 10 for safeties. But I want to see him ascend. I want to know that last year's quote unquote breakout year, that there's more to come from that, especially in terms of finding the football, because I'm sorry, but he started 30 games in 2 years and did not have a single pick. And he only had 7 passes defensed. And he wasn't a starter last year until Quentin Demps got hurt. So, and then he had a great year, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. And I think, again, I like Adrian Amos. I think he fits this defense. I just want to see him continue to improve and not just kind of be a player that's only going to get you a handful of plays in the football season.
Here's my thing with that last Amos point, and because I'm just completely guessing and spitballing, but I'll make the assumption that the Bears, as long as he just has a year like he did last year, regardless of takeaways, that they're going to try to sign him to a long-term deal. But I don't necessarily think they should, and I think that kind of plays into your point. I think safeties like him in his current mold, the way he plays as like a hybrid linebacker, hybrid safety type guy, that's not the most irreplaceable position. That's not something that's like the most conducive usage of cap space necessarily. And I wouldn't unless he builds on his 2017, the way like you kind of like the way you kind of illustrated that.
Yeah, and again, I think he has the talent and ability to. I think when you're talking contract extension, I think Eddie Goldman is priority one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's the anchor of the defense.
Right. If you look at the Bears, they've gotten Kyle Long, Charles Leno, and Akeem Hicks done before the season has started in the last couple of years, and I would put Eddie Goldman in that category before I put Adrian Amos in that category. Because I'd be curious to see. Listen, I don't think that the Bears. I'm guessing the Bears don't agree with Pro Football Focus that Adrian Amos is the best safety in the NFL.
I hope they don't. don't.
Yeah. I don't think that they. I think they would probably have their own numbers. Again, they're extremely pleased with the way he's played, and they showed that by the way they handled. I mean, they could have taken Minka Fitzpatrick. They could have taken Derwin James. They could have taken a safety in the second round. There are a lot of good ones still available. They could have gone out and signed a safety. Look, Eric Reed's still available.
Yeah, he's still available.
So there were certainly opportunities for them to do that, but they believe in him, and that's good, and they should. And they're obviously in a really good financial spot at that position. Have two quality players as day 3 draft picks still on their rookie contracts. I mean, that's the dream from a financial standpoint. But he seems to me the type of guy that all right, you broke out last year. That's great. Do it again. Let's see if you can do it one more time. And then we'll back up the Brinks truck a little bit.
Now, one more of these points. So who would you characterize, Kevin, as the safest starting player on the Bears roster? So this doesn't necessarily have to mean their best player. Mm-hmm. And so who's the safest guy? The guy that's most entrenched in his role, and he doesn't really have to worry about any positional battles, anything like that. Like, who's the safest guy on the Bears roster going into camps?
Well, I mean, I guess we're going to ignore like the free agents, like Allen Robinson, like is clearly going to be the starting receiver.
Right. Okay. So you can eliminate guys that have been like highly paid or whatever. You can eliminate like the big paid.
So, I would probably look at Eddie Jackson in that category. In terms of, unless he takes a huge step back, that's somebody that, when you asked that question, I was kind of thinking long-term too, like long-term security. Like that's somebody who is, maybe with this franchise for a while. I look at Cody Whitehair in that category too. I guess we don't know if it'll be center or guard, but we know he'll be starting for this team in some capacity. So I would throw him in there. Listen, there are still Bears fans that don't like him, but I would feel comfortable putting Charles Leno in that category. Like they really like Charles Leno, and they gave him the money, and they didn't draft a tackle. And so I think he's pretty entrenched there on the left side. Obviously, Akeem Hicks is. I'll give you one, I think, and of course, as we mentioned, the guys who signed the contract extensions, Fuller, Amu Kamara, and then all the new guys are all fine. I'll give you one guy who's safe for now that I'm really curious to watch is Dan Trevathan. When Dan Trevathan's healthy, he is a dynamic player. We saw it last year when he was healthy. Even in 2016, he was making big-time plays for this team. But you look at the salary cap number on him in 2019. You look at Iyiegbuniwe. Now, you can't expect a fourth-round pick to take over for someone like Dan Trevathan, but they did draft him in the 4th round. I mean, that's a guy that they're going to want to build and see what he can – or develop, I should say. I'm very curious to watch Dan Trevathan because I think he needs to play close to a full season, be effective to guarantee that he can play on that salary in 2019 and keep – whether it's Kwiatkowski or Iyiegbuniwe from taking that starting job. So he's a guy who's very safe for 2018. One of the leaders of the defense, probably should be a captain. But I'm interested to see how he performs this year, thinking ahead to that 2019 kind of cap number situation.
Yeah, with the Trevathan situation, it almost feels like they kind of struck. They feel like they struck out with Jarrell Freeman and Trevathan from that perspective. in free agency, and now they've decided to go with a grassroots perspective at linebacker, which kind of ironically puts someone they view as a starter now, but might not by the end of the year. They went with the opposite in getting Roquan Smith and E.A. Bunue with two, which with like you just said, 2 top 4 draft picks. If you're drafting a guy in the 4th round, you maybe don't expect him to be a starter right away, but you're expecting him to be some kind of major contributor with your coaching and with your refinement in due time. So that's an interesting thought process there. To close this out, Kevin, I want you to give me positional battles you'll be watching, one on offense, one on defense, and then like a 3rd one maybe people aren't considering, if there is something like that, before all the fun begins of the summer.
Yeah. Okay. So offense, I guess we could say left guard to start. Is James Daniels? Can he start right away, or is that going to be Eric Kush?
You're thinking Daniels over Kush, okay? Or Daniels?
Yeah, I think I made a depth chart last week, and I put Kush there because I think when OTAs start, it'll be Kush, just because he knows what he's doing. And it might take a little bit for James Daniels, but eventually that'll be. I think that happened with Cody Whitehair. I feel like I remember there being a flashpoint practice in June where suddenly there was Cody Whitehair running with the ones. So I wonder if that happens with James Daniels and when that happens. The offense, the starting spots are pretty set. I think it's more about, roster battles, playing time. Kevin White's kind of a big factor in that. What kind of role is he going to be, the number 4 receiver, or is it going to be Benny Fowler? That's kind of another one to look at. On defense, I guess the only starting job that's up for grabs would be the Mitch Unrein spot. And then we mentioned Jonathan Bullard, Roy Robertson Harris. Is Bilal Nichols good enough to take that job as a rookie? So that's going to be the kind of the battle, I guess, to watch. It's funny because it's been a quote unquote battle each of the last 2 summers that Unrein has won from day one. Like, there's never really been a true competition like that. It's always been Mitch Unrein. We've always talked about, it's Unrein versus Bullard, but it's been Mitch Unrein from day one. Like, there's never been there was never a day where I was like, today's the day Bullard's going to take that job. It's always been Mitch Unrein. So I think that position spot is a little bit more, kind of open. Listen, if one of these, if a cornerback wants to come out there and challenge Bryce Callahan for that nickel position, I guess that'll be my bonus. Like that, does Cravon? I thought Cravon LeBlanc was going to maybe win that position last year, and he didn't. The Bears like Bryce Callahan a lot. He's coming off his best season, but he just can't stay healthy. As one of these undrafted rookies, maybe step in there and provide a little competition for him. Is Marcus Cooper decide to turn himself into a slot corner? I don't know. I think Bryce Callahan is fine for what you need there. Again, the Bears like him a lot, but that's kind of the other position that I'd say, Okay. I should mention outside linebacker. I think Sam Acho's your starter. Sam Acho
to start, not Aaron Lynch.
Yeah, and again, I'm going on a technicality a little bit because most often the Bears start in their base, and it's going to be Sam Acho. Now in their nickel, it could be a different situation. Sam Acho got a nice contract. He is coming off his best year since his rookie season. He knows his defense, but most importantly, he's durable. I don't know what Aaron Lynch is yet. I just haven't seen. We watched him for 1.5 practices a couple of weeks ago. He played 7 games last year. Played 7 games the year before that. His weight fluctuated in San Francisco. He wasn't nearly as effective as he was as a rookie. I can't project him to start over a known commodity like Acho. I'm not saying Acho's a game wrecker, but you know what you're getting from Acho, and he's going to be in the right spot, and he's going to make a few plays for you. Aaron Lynch probably has more upside, but I got to see it. I got to see this guy in OTAs. I got to see this guy when the pads come on. I got to see how he is working in this defense and if he's making big plays. It's just hard for me to project that for a guy who hasn't done really anything on the field in 3 years.
Right. It makes sense. And to me, that's probably their most – I think we led with it to start the podcast. I think that's probably their most precarious position overall. They don't really know what they have at edge rusher. They don't really know what they have with Leonard Floyd for as much as they believe in him. Clearly, if they're not just based on how They're not investing much. They're kind of like going, and I think reclamation project is a little drastic to describe Aaron Lynch and Kylie Fitz, considering their health and availability recently, but it also fits. That's probably the most, to me, intriguing spot in the entire roster.
Yeah, for sure. That's the one spot in the roster. It would not shock me if they sign a veteran in June, or if they, wait till roster cuts in September and bring some guy in who just got cut from a team. I mean, that is the position that we could still see some movement and some additions at some point in the next few months before week 1. But listen. I think Acho and Lynch are making a combined $7 or $8 million this year. That's still a lot of money, for that position. So they might just be fine with it. I think if anything, there's a ton of pressure on Leonard Floyd. There's also a ton of pressure on Akeem Hicks to be just as effective rushing the passer as he was last year. And that's asking a lot. I mean, he put up huge numbers last year, but you're asking him and Eddie Goldman to help rush the passer, because I just think you don't have a given right now opposite Leonard Floyd. And Leonard Floyd himself is just unfortunately not a given per se, because he just hasn't been able to stay healthy consistently.
To that Hicks point, and I don't want to because we're finishing up here, I don't want to go off of it too much. They're going to need someone, based off your previous point, they're going to need someone like Bullard or Robertson Harris to really take that opposite end spot, because Hicks was great last year, but he faded a lot in the second half. I mean, if you just go by the box score, especially, I mean, he had 1.5 sacks in the last 8 games of the year. So if that happens again, I mean, this defense isn't going to take the next step. He has to be the guy. He has to be spread out his pass rush prowess, and he has to be as consistently dominant. And that's not to say he wasn't good in the second half of the year. He just wasn't as great. He was so good to start the year when he was fresh, when they could play him at 95% of the snaps, that it was just such a difficult level to maintain. And if they want to have that same kind of player, they're going to need a guy opposite like that. So, I mean, hopefully, ideally, rather, this summer sorts all of that out. Kevin, I appreciate you taking the time. I know we've had to reschedule this aplenty, but we finally found a nice little slot, and I appreciate you taking the time right before all of the fun kicks off. And then I hope you eventually, after everything is over in the next few weeks, you'll enjoy that little, we'll all enjoy it rather, that little short break in the summer and in mid-June and all that. I hope you do.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, it's quickly become my favorite few weeks of the calendar year, those weeks in July.
Yeah, you schedule out a nice little vacation or something. Everyone loves it. That is Kevin Fishbain of The Athletic. He is the Bears beat writer there. The Athletic Chicago, that is. Apologies. You can follow him on Twitter at KFishbain. You can follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski, and then follow all of our work at Windy City Gridiron and on Twitter at WC Gridiron. You can.
Hey, Robert, can I give a quick plug for a sec?
Yes, go ahead, for sure.
Yeah, just so folks know, I know at Windy City Gridiron, I've gotten questions from people there about The Athletic. I just wanted to everyone know, for the listeners, if you go to my Twitter page, there's a discounted link, and the great thing about it is you get a free week trial. So I always recommend people give it a try, spend a week at The Athletic. You get access to every Athletic website. That's all the cities. The national baseball content. We're now up to, I think, 20 different NFL teams that are covered. And I imagine that number is going to grow a little bit. So click the link in my bio. You get a discount for the year. You also get the week free trial, so you can kind of give it a spin. You can always tweet at me and ask me questions about it. But I still have not met somebody who has had a subscription to The Athletic and just been disappointed by the content. So hopefully that remains, and folks will like what they see. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, to go to my Twitter profile at KFishbain and check out the link. They'll get you a discounted subscription to The Athletic if you're interested.
He's not lying, guys. It's a great deal, and they do great work. Kevin in particular, covering the Bears. And that should just about wrap up this podcast, this episode of WCG Radio. Stay classy, everybody.